Today on Locked On Canadiens, we talk about our favorite topic, Arber Xhekaj. We are also going to recap that Minnesota Wild game. Wow, I'm doing just as well on this as the Canadiens did against Minnesota. And then we're going to look ahead to Buffalo. All that's coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens.
Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 713 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every day. Here, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're also on YouTube, and don't forget to hit that bell so you'll get all of our new content. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla, who has been bearing with me since the beginning of October and has so far not quit the podcast. Scott, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing better than the Montreal Canadiens power play, which is an admittedly low bar to be crossing at this point in the season. But tonight's the first time this season I've been openly frustrated with the Montreal Canadiens. And I get that we've talked a lot about how this season is. It's not made to be a winning season. It's a rebuilding season. And tonight is one night where I think this was a game that we talked in the previous episode about how they could win that. And that was to test Marc-Andre Fleury. And they did. And then they didn't for a little while. And it was just a very frustrating game where they had their opportunities. And Fleury, he of a 5.5 goals against average, decided to dial back the clocks a couple years here and become prime Marc-Andre Fleury again in a 3-1 Canadiens loss to the Wild.
It's funny because that first game, the first goal there that Cole Caulfield scored, and not to take anything away from Cole Caulfield, it was a gift from Marc-Andre Fleury. It was vintage MAF, and that unfortunately was not really the way the rest of the night went on. And I think, we are going to talk about the power play a little bit later. We're going to talk about the game as a whole tonight. And I think one thing that we talked about in our previous episode when we were previewing this game was that the Canadiens needed to capitalize on those opportunities against the Minnesota Wild. The opportunities were there for the taking, but it felt at times that the Canadiens were giving the Wild more opportunities than they were seizing. And that, to me, was very frustrating. There were a lot of turnovers. I was not happy to see that. And I think part of it is that they didn't necessarily play all that clean. They didn't play tightened up. And I don't think that Martin St. Louis is going to let them get away with that for too much longer. But I did think that this was a game that was extremely winnable. And I think, Scott, you said very much to that effect as well.
Yeah, I look at this game and it was a lot of little mental errors. There was a point where the defense seemed to drop down to block shots that were not coming, and the Wild just kept skating around the zone here. And there were times that 5-on-5 looked like a Minnesota power play, and that's not what you want if you're the Canadiens. The officiating wasn't great, and when we get into the next segment, it wouldn't have made a difference with how bad the Canadiens power play is right now. I think there was an opportunity for growth here. I think they do miss Juraj Slafkovsky in the lineup a little bit here. Admittedly, the forward groups played pretty well. The only group that's struggling to generate a lot of pressure, because I think they're drawing still a lot of the heavy matchups, is Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield, and Sean Monahan. I think they had their moments, but not enough sustained pressure. They needed to test Fleury more than they did, because early on, every shot that Marc-Andre Fleury faced looked like an adventure, and they shouldn't have been. They were not difficult shots. They weren't high danger chances, and there were rebounds and there were other things. It's an opportunity for Martin St. Louis to teach a little bit here, and that it's hey, this is what we were doing. We need to build on the first good efforts. We got into the zone. We cycled the puck well and created a scoring chance. We need to get someone going to the net for a rebound, or someone's got to be there taking away the goalie's eyes. And it's going to be really interesting to see if they can do that, because Buffalo is a high-flying team right now as well. They're vulnerable at the back, kind of like Minnesota was. The goaltending is not as good as it could be. Craig Anderson and Eric Comrie have both done a serviceable job, but the opportunities are there. But the Sabres, a lot like Minnesota, have the ability to grind down and win with their stars. So I'm very interested to see what Martin St. Louis does at 5-on-5 here, because as I look at the numbers at 5-on-5 tonight, Canadiens had more shot attempts. They won that battle. Scoring chances for and against were about even. High danger chances for and against were even. They had slightly more expected goals. It's just sometimes the puck doesn't bounce your way. And the thing is, don't let bad habits creep in now. Okay, this is what we were doing wrong. Let's fix that and go into Buffalo and take care of that next. It's frustrating that they lost. They had, more expected goals overall, but the expected goals for percentage was about even. But use it as a building thing. The Wild are a very well-built team. Yeah, they've struggled out of the gate, but they're still a very good team. And the Canadiens, admittedly, after a very bumpy start, came to life a little bit as the game went on. I think that's really important for a young team that kind of bent but didn't break fully in this game like we saw last year.
Right, and that's the thing, like the score was 3-1, but I didn't feel that same hopelessness that I would feel at the end of the games last year. It didn't feel like a spiral or anything like that. It just felt like they were just not playing well, right? And it's fine. I think, it wasn't disastrous. It wasn't hopeless. It wasn't a situation where they were playing in such a way that you thought that they could never get it together, right? They were just making those mistakes. They were giving the puck away too much. They weren't generating enough offense. Like you said, I mean, the Nick Suzuki line was getting caved in possession, right? Like, because they have those hard matchups. And I think once the Canadiens kind of balance out that lineup a little bit more and give people more, balance out the assignments, I think it's going to help out a lot. And there were some good people. There were some good plays. There were some players that did play well this game. But the one thing that did not happen was a power play that we wanted to see. And Scott he has his head in his hands, but unfortunately I will make him talk about it in our next segment. But yes, I will. Scott, I'm sorry. You're going to have to. But first, you get a quick break while I tell our lovely listeners about BetOnline. As you know, it is your number one source for betting football. And for the start of the new basketball season, we're well into the hockey season. You can bet on hockey as well. And at betonline.net, you're going to find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every single game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, NHL, boxing, golf, you name it, they've got it. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. And Scott, unfortunately, I will make you start talking about the power play. And I know you don't want to, but something that was extremely shocking to me, to say the least, was that it wasn't Alex Burrows. Like, there's an article in The Athletic about how who runs the power play on the practices, and it is Martin St. Louis himself. And that makes me really sad, because this is the point where Martin St. Louis comes back down to earth. And it does feel a little bit like, this is based on the article in The Athletic again, it does feel a little bit like he has the right philosophy and he's trying, and it's the execution that isn't going very well. And I wonder, Scott, if it's a moment where, he's been really, really vocal on making his players be more creative and more take more risks, more bold. That's something that we've liked about the Canadiens to date. But I wonder if it's just a situation where it's not even a lack of execution, but maybe the cohesion is missing. Maybe the chemistry is missing. Maybe, we said that it's not like they're not trying, they're just trying the wrong thing. So I'm wondering what your thought is on that.
My biggest thing is, and this is not to slight and call out one person, because the power play is a 5-man unit, and overall it's just not working. Chris Wideman tonight had a couple of moments at the point that they win a clean faceoff. Great. A great way to start the power play. and Wideman fumbles it. It goes out of the zone, and then they are stuck in this weird forechecky trying to get into the zone hell, and then they end up having to take a penalty during it. It hasn't worked. I don't mind Chris Wideman as a power play option. I don't. I do not think he is the top power play option. And I know that once Mike Matheson is healthy, which Godspeed on that, it'll likely be his spot on the top power play. But friend of the show, Mark Dumont, pointed out, it's like you have someone like Jordan Harris, who has been very efficient at distributing the puck and is a safe option. He's not going to do the overly risky thing, but he's going to put himself in the best possible position. It's time to just try something new. And if you want a bigger shot, I mean, screw it. Why not put Arber Xhekaj back there and see what he can do? You have then multiple shooting options. You have Suzuki on one side, you have Caulfield on the other, and you have Xhekaj at whatever point of the umbrella they are playing or whatnot. You got to try something new at this point. And I think just trotting out the same thing again is just accepting defeat that, well, maybe the puck will just go in this time. And sometimes you might get lucky. Sure. But overall, it is just not flowing the way that it needs to. We saw that 4v3 power play against the Penguins that they won in overtime. And there was a patience and a purpose to it. This one is, they can sling the puck around, and that's great, and they're moving it. No one is actually making attempts on the net, except for Caulfield usually, which is just rehashing the Shea Weber thing, except 8 inches shorter and better at hitting the net with his shot right now. If you allow teams to key in on one thing, when you're passing it back and forth, they're not going to cheat towards Nick Suzuki or Chris Wideman or whomever. They're still going to just cheat towards Caulfield because they know the puck is eventually going there. And I know that they like to try new things, and they will try new things. It's just not working right now. And they were given opportunities in this game. They really were. And spoiling those opportunities is part of the reason they lost. A regular functioning power play at least probably has them score another goal, maybe 2. And they just didn't get it tonight.
I absolutely agree with you. Like, I don't feel hopeless about it. Like, this is the theme of this episode, right? I don't feel hopeless about the Habs because I do believe that Martin St. Louis is going to be able to figure this out, whether it's with Alex Burrows or not. And I don't mean that as in like Alex Burrows is fired or anything like that. I just mean, there's going to be ideas that get thrown around. And one thing that I think Martin St. Louis has been really good at is reducing things and simplifying things, right? Like, so you're going to take that 5-man unit, you're going to break it down into 2-people units and just kind of see like how people are working together and that kind of stuff. Like, that's the kind of nerdy stuff that I think, Martin St. Louis is like, it's right up his alley. And I think that they'll figure it out. It just concerns me that it's something where it doesn't matter when the team is different or the coach is different or whatever, it's still not figuring itself out. Like, I don't understand why over many iterations of the Canadiens and many other, like many different players, many different coaches, many different power play coaches, I don't understand why it's been since, like, I feel like when Alex Kovalev was here was the last time that I was happy with this power play. That's definitely what it feels like.
It has been a while. Like, the last time I think they had a top power play was, I want to say, the lockout shortened season under Michel Therrien when Subban won a Norris and Pacioretty was on pace what would have been 40 goals in a regular season, etc. It's not that they lack creative players, because they have the Dachs, they have the Monahans, they have Suzuki, they have Caulfield. They have maybe not Josh Anderson as much, but there are creative pieces and the chances are there. It's just sometimes there feels like a hesitation or one pass too many that teams are just sitting in their shell and they're not being tested there. There's nothing, probing that defense in terms of shots. And that's a problem. If defenses are allowed to settle, you're waves crashing into a rock. Eventually you might break it down, but that's going to take a while versus trying to shift and move here. And if you allow them to just kind of group and sit there, you're not going to get what you want out of this. And it's early, and yes, we are expecting the Canadiens to be bad. Their power play has to operate better than this. I'm not asking for top 10. I'm asking for barely league average. And I think it makes a huge difference for the Canadiens here. And also, maybe Jake Allen just kind of deserves better. He's back there getting shelled on opposing power plays, and the Habs sometimes can't even get a shot through on net. because of how frustrating their setup is. It's just a banging your head against the wall kind of thing over again, is that you see what they're trying and it's not working. At some point, someone just got to go, you know what? We're calling it audible and doing something different and just figure it out from there. Fly by the seat of your pants and make it work.
That's exactly it. It's like fly by the seat of your pants and make it work. And to be honest, like it's funny, but last year when somebody was going rogue and flying, just making things up as they went along, that's when the puck was going in on the power play. So I do think that there is some value to that. Maybe they're just overthinking it. Maybe everybody's overthinking it. Maybe the coach is overthinking it. Maybe we're overthinking it. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop overthinking all of that. We're going to talk about who was good in this game, and we're going to look ahead to the game against the Buffalo Sabres, and all of that is coming up in just one moment. But first, I have to tell you all about SimpliSafe, because the numbers do not lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. And I know because I use SimpliSafe in my own home. They protect you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. And here's why I love it. This is something that I do all the time, is that I have that anxiety and I always scare myself into thinking that somebody's trying to break into my house, whether I watch too many scary movies, whether I love detective shows, whether, I just watch too many of those gruesome murder shows. I'm always terrified. But with SimpliSafe, they know what's a real threat and what isn't. So not only do I feel protected against real threats, I also know that I don't have to wake up the entire house freaking out that there's an actual threat out there, because SimpliSafe does that homework for you, and it absolutely has your back. So I'm going to tell you that you should join me and customize the perfect system for your own home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonnhl. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonnhl to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, my friend, it is time to say some nice things.
If we want to get into it, and this is going to be fancy stat nerd time, if you want to look things up, we highly recommend Natural Stat Trick for everything. It allows you to get your basic counting stats under there. It allows you to see power play stats, heat maps. If you ever see one of those little squiggly line graphs that we will occasionally post when the Habs are playing well and losing 5-0 because the NHL is a completely ridiculous world, Natural Stat Trick has all that covered. We use them so much because it's very easy to find what I'm looking for in there. This is not an ad. We just love them dearly. We do, like, straight up. Them and Cap Friendly help run the backbone of the show when we have to look up information, and we're not even kidding.
They are our Nick Suzuki and our Cole Caulfield.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely that. Looking at this game tonight, Arber Xhekaj struggled very badly in the first period, and everyone saw it. He was not having a very strong start to things, and he managed to turn that around. And in terms of defensemen, he was their leader in shot share at just under 68%, actually tied with Jonathan Kovacevic. He played well bouncing back after a very rough start, and he's not the only defenseman either. Out of everyone, like Jordan Harris and Jonathan Kovacevic have been very, very good. And just so I'm not being unfair, David Savard had a very strong game for what he does. He blocked a lot of key shots. His lead pass is what set up Mike Hoffman's penalty shot. They got heavily outchanced, but I think David Savard played exactly the kind of game that you expect him to, and that's to block a ton of shots and clear the zone. That's it. I'm not anticipating much more from that. But the young defenseman really bounced back from a rough start. I was really impressed by Arber Xhekaj and Jonathan Kovacevic and Jordan Harris tonight. And we haven't mentioned Caden Gooley. He didn't have a strong game. That happens. It's not the end of the world. Kay, please don't yell at us. You know this to be true. I'm really impressed with the way this young defense core is showing composure, even when things aren't going their way so far. And that's valuable experience. It makes choices a lot harder when everyone gets healthy here in a couple of weeks.
I think that's it. It's like, as you kept talking, I was like, what about the defensemen that are coming back? And it's not just on your mind. Our commenters sometimes talk about, like when Edmonton's back, or this makes them expendable, or this. So I do think that there's a lot in the Habs defense, which I thought is interesting in that we thought that the defense was going to be a huge question mark. And I'm not ready to call it an answer just yet. But I do think that they have played much better than we expected, both on an individual level and as a whole. That was something that I'm very, very pleasantly surprised by, because I just thought it was going to be the same black hole that it often is. It was going to be, hectic and chaotic, and it's not. It feels steady and it feels well thought out and measured. I'm not about to sit here and tell you that we've got, like Cale Makar paired with Victor Hedman or something like that. Like, no, I'm not saying that, but I think that we thought it was going to be an abject disaster, and it's not. And I think, I would call it sound. I would not say that it's, top tier or anything like that. But as a whole, I would call it sound defense. I think they're doing things right. And I think the personnel is, again, quietly doing things right. I want to bring up Caden Gooley, but you know what? I'm going to refrain this time, because I have a lot of praise for Jordan Harris, as always. And also for Scott, I'm going to pronounce this very badly, Kovacevic.
Kovacevic. I've heard Kovacevic. I've heard
Kovacevic.
I said Kovacevic at first, but I think it's Kovacevic.
Yes.
I think
That's what I've been calling him.
If someone actually can, correct us
Confirm.
on that nicely, let me know. I thought it was Kovacevic, because that's what I've been hearing on the broadcast. Even
broadcast.
Subscribe to Broadcast. We love them too.
We do. They're awesome.
They are not an answer yet, but they are making the solution that much more appealing. Yeah, Joel Edmondson's not here, but they're still doing well enough treading water. This was never a defensive group that was going to produce a ton of points. It never has been. It hasn't since PK and Markov were here. Yeah, we had Jeff Petrie and he's gone. Now Mike Matheson is in that role. There is no one else filling in that big point producer there. Gooley will get some points. Wideman is kind of a secondary option here. We need to reassess kind of what the Canadiens' defensive core is going to look like. And I think they're going to be a lot more about stopping entries to the zone and getting the puck out. There's going to be secondary assists. There's going to be some goals, but they're not going to be Cale Makar. They're not going to be Adam Fox. They're not going to be those type of players, because they currently aren't at that level yet. Simply as that. They haven't drafted one of those talents or developed one quite yet. They have a lot of very talented players in their own things that they do, and that's okay. And like I said, the game against Buffalo is going to be interesting. They've got a lot of young talent that likes to play run and gun, fun style hockey. And not Don Granato, Tony Granato. Don Granato? I think it's Don Granato. If I'm wrong, if you're a Sabres fan, listen to this, please tell me.
Yeah, it is. It's Don.
Okay.
We're very tired, folks.
Yes.
Like, listen, every time we make a mistake, people like jump on why do you have a podcast? You make mistakes. We make mistakes because we're tired. We're very tired.
Frequently very, very tired. And that's the thing it's Rasmus Dahlin is currently on pace, is continuing to set an NHL record for, goals scored by a defenseman to start a season. And it's incredibly, he's so good. Owen Power's right there. And then they have that offense. Alex Tuch's very good. JJ Peterka, all these guys. It's going to be a very interesting game. It's two young teams finding their way. Buffalo is a little bit further ahead in this, and they should be. They've been doing this for 12 years now. They were a little bit further ahead in this, but you see the plan now for that. And the Canadiens should be trying to follow in that footstep here a little bit, because it's working right now. Yeah, they're not there yet, but they're on their way there. They're a lot closer than Montreal is right now. It's going to be a very interesting game to see if the Canadiens can bounce back after a game where they played well against a strong team that always, regardless of how good either team is, gives them fits. Always, always, always does.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I do think, though, that we're past the era of really boring Buffalo Sabres beating the Montreal Canadiens, and a little bit more exciting Buffalo Sabres beating the Montreal Canadiens. We know that those games were not games that I'd look forward to be honest. It's been years since the last time I looked. Like it was very like in French we call it plate. That's exactly what those games were all about. I'm hoping this one will be a little bit less plate, a little bit more fun for us to watch. And I think it's gonna like Scott said, it's gonna teach us a lot about the direction the Canadians are going in, and we will obviously keep an eye on that game. We're gonna report or recap or analyze every single thing going on over the course of this long season. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. And if you're subscribed on YouTube, but please hit that bell there to make sure that you get all the notifications whenever we post something. And you can follow us on Twitter at LO_Canadians. You can find me on Twitter at The Active Stick. You'll find my co-host at Scott Matla. Send us emails at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. We love pictures of your dogs and Habs gear or not, of stories about them. We love stories about how you became Canadiens fans. We love all kinds of mail. We've got a mailbag. We literally just got a mailbag question just now before we started recording. So please, please, please send us emails at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can also leave them in the YouTube comments. But if you're mean to anybody, including us, we are going to delete your comment and not ask your question. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you tomorrow.